Hello and welcome to Bite My Pi. Over the years the television has become ever smarter, but if you like recording TV programs you still usually end up with some sort of box sitting underneath it. Not only are most of these devices substantial in size, but they often cost a pretty penny too. In this video we're going to explore a cheaper alternative where we'll turn the humble Raspberry Pi into your very own personal video recorder, or Pi PVR for short. So if this sounds of interest to you, stick around. Okay, before we get started on the setup, let's take a look at the nuts and bolts of the project. Of course I'm talking about the hardware. To build our Pi PVR we're going to need a few components, so let's take a look at them. First we have the essential parts that it simply won't work without. Obviously you need a computer. I'll be using the latest Raspberry Pi 4 with 4GB of RAM, but any Pi 4 will do. In fact even a Pi 3 should suffice. The software we'll be installing is actually available for a wide range of computers, but a Raspberry Pi is probably one of the most cost-effective options. Since the Raspberry Pi doesn't have a conventional hard drive, the next thing you'll need is a micro SD card. A card of 16GB in size is really the bare minimum you want to be using, and if you intend to store your TV recordings on it, you'll want one far larger. Next up you'll need a power supply. I'd recommend the official Raspberry Pi one, as this should supply sufficient power for both the Pi and its accessories. Naturally you'll need a display. It would make sense to use the TV that you intend to attach the functioning Pi PVR to. Next is a cable. If you're using a Pi 4, that will be a micro HDMI to full-size HDMI cable. The advantage of HDMI over older types of video cable is that, along with picture, it also carries sound. So if you're using a monitor rather than a TV for this project, you'll want to make sure that it's got built-in speakers. The next item we'll need is a TV tuner. I'll be using the Raspberry Pi's TV hat, which stands for hardware attached on top. In the UK this works with both standard and high definition over-the-air TV channels, otherwise known as Freeview. Now while this is a very cost-effective solution, bear in mind that it does only have a single tuner. What this basically means is that you'll only be able to record one TV channel at a time. If this isn't sufficient for your needs, you could try something else like a USB twin tuner for example. Then lastly on the essential parts list we'll need a TV aerial. Hopefully you've already got one of these attached to your house, in which case you'll simply need to connect your aerial cable from the wall socket to the TV tuner on your Raspberry Pi. Now let's look at the parts that are optional but will make the project better. First we have an external USB solid state or hard drive. Not only are these typically much larger in capacity than a micro SD card, but they're usually much more reliable and faster as well. Next is a powered USB hub. You may need one of these if you find that your Pi is struggling for power once the accessories are connected. Though optional, it's always nice to put your Raspberry Pi in a case. Bear in mind if you're using the TV hat you'll want a case that can accommodate this as well. And lastly you may wish to add a small fan. This might not be a bad idea at all if you're running the Raspberry Pi 4, as it does have a tendency to run a little warm. Okay, now that you've hopefully chosen the hardware you're going to use, let's get on with the setup. Right, so on your computer, open a web browser and search for Raspberry Pi OS, which is the new name for Raspbian. It's this Raspberry Pi downloads link that we want, and as I'm on a Windows machine, it's this Raspberry Pi imager for Windows that I'm going to download. So I'm going to save that to my downloads directory. Once that's downloaded you can close the web browser, and if we open File Explorer and go to Downloads, there it is. Okay, let's double click that to launch the software, and we'll click on Yes to proceed. Then on the installation wizard click Install. Leave the box ticked and click Finish to run the software. If it doesn't appear it may be hiding behind File Explorer, so let's close that window. At this point, if you haven't already, you want to make sure that you've connected the micro SD card to your computer, and then we're going to click on Choose OS. Now if you're planning on running your Pi PVR on the micro SD card, you can skip ahead in the video to where we select LibreELEC from this menu. But if, like me, you're going to set it up on an external USB drive, you need to select the Raspberry Pi OS 32-bit option. You may quite rightly be wondering why we're messing around with a micro SD card and Raspberry Pi OS when we actually want to put LibreELEC onto an external USB drive. And the answer is that by default the Raspberry Pi isn't set up to be able to boot from USB, at least not at the time of this recording. So we're going to use Raspberry Pi OS to enable that functionality. Next we're going to click on Choose SD card and select the micro SD card, and then you can click on Write. It gives us a handy warning that any existing data on it will be wiped. So when you're happy to continue, click Yes. This may take a few minutes, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, that's successfully written, so as it tells us, we can now remove the card from the computer. Then click on Continue and close the program. The time has now come. Connect a keyboard, mouse and monitor to your Raspberry Pi, pop in the micro SD card and power on. Okay, when it gets to the Raspberry Pi's desktop we get this welcome message. Let's click on Next to get started. You need to set the country, language and time zone, and when they're okay for you, click Next. The default user account for Raspberry Pi OS is just Pi, and the default password is Raspberry, which, as it says, it's recommended to change that. So enter a new password in here and then confirm it, and then we can click on Next. Now if your display has a black border around the edge of it like mine does, you need to tick this box and then we can click Next. Here you need to select your wireless network and then click on Next again. Then enter your wireless key and click on Next. And now we're going to update the operating system by clicking on Next once more. This process may take a while, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's finished. Yes, that did take some time, but it's now up to date and I can click OK. And now let's do a restart for all of the changes to take effect. And as you can see, the black borders are gone and we're ready to do the important stuff. So to get started, click on the little terminal icon in the top bar, and we just need to type in a few commands, but don't panic, none of them are difficult. So the first is sudo space nano space /etc /default /RPI hyphen EE prom hyphen update. Then press enter on your keyboard. All we need to do is use the cursor keys on the keyboard to move along and then delete this word critical and replace it with stable. And then we're going to save and exit, so hold down the control key on your keyboard and press X. Press Y for yes and then press enter. Next we need to type in the command to update the chip on the Raspberry Pi to enable USB booting. So that is sudo space RPI hyphen EE prom hyphen update space hyphen D space hyphen A, and then press enter. Once that's done, type sudo space reboot and press enter to restart. Okay, the last thing we need to do is check that the change has been applied. So open the terminal again and this time type VCGENCMD space bootloader underscore version and press enter. And so long as the date is the 15th of June 2020 or newer, we now have a bootloader that supports USB booting. So let's exit out of the terminal and we can shut down the Raspberry Pi. Right, we're now going to prepare the storage for our Raspberry Pi PVR. As mentioned earlier, the software we're going to use is called LibreELEC. This is a platform that its tagline says provides just enough OS for Kodi. In other words, it's built to run Kodi. And if you're not familiar with Kodi, this is a powerful open source media player. Okay, so let's get going. Back on the Windows computer, I'm going to type in the search box Raspberry and relaunch the Raspberry Pi imager. I'll click yes to allow it to run. Make sure that the media you're going to use with your Pi is connected to your computer, whether it's a micro SD card or an external USB drive. Then click on Choose OS, and this time we're going to select LibreELEC. You need to choose the version that's suitable for your Raspberry Pi, so in my case that's the Raspberry Pi 4. Then click on Choose SD card. So I'm using an external USB solid state drive. Click on whatever you're using here, and then you can click on Write. Obviously any data on that device will be wiped, so when you're happy to continue, click on Yes. Depending on the speed of your micro SD card or USB drive, this process may take a little while, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's done. That was actually pretty quick on my external SSD. So when yours is done, you can remove the device from your computer, click on Continue, and close the program. If they're not already connected, you need to plug in your USB keyboard and mouse and connect your TV or monitor to your Raspberry Pi. Also make sure that the TV tuner is connected and that you've hooked up the TV aerial. Then, depending on what you're using for storage, either attach the micro SD card or external USB drive. And lastly, connect the power supply to turn on your Raspberry Pi. If you see this message, it either means you've forgotten to connect your micro SD card, or if you're using an external USB drive, it means that the procedure we carried out earlier to enable USB booting on the Raspberry Pi hasn't worked and you'll need to try that again. But hopefully it's booting successfully and you're seeing something similar to what's on screen. When it gets to the resizing file system part, depending on the speed and size of your storage, it may take a little while. So let's speed things along. When LibreELEC loads and you get to the welcome screen, you can choose your language and then click Next. Next you have the option to change its name. I'm just going to leave it on the default LibreELEC and click Next. Here we can join the Pi to the network. If your wireless name doesn't show up, you can tap F5 on your keyboard to refresh the list. Then select yours and click on Connect. Now you need to enter your wireless key and then click on OK. Once it's connected, you can click Next. On this screen we have the option to configure a couple of services. As it tells us, SSH or Secure Shell is a way for advanced users to access the underlying operating system remotely. If you want to be able to do that, you can turn it on by clicking this slider here. I'll leave that one turned off. The other service is Samba, which as you can see is turned on by default. I'm going to leave that one enabled as it can be handy for accessing your TV recordings from other devices on your network. When you've made your selections, click on Next, and then you can click on Next again to complete the initial setup. To take care of our TV recordings, we're going to use some software called Tvheadend. This comes in two parts, a back end or server which takes care of all of the heavy lifting, and a front end or client which allows us to watch our programs. So let's set up the Tvheadend server first. If you come down and hover over add-ons and then click on Install from repository. Next we need to click on All repositories. Then if we scroll down and click on Services, we need to scroll down again until we get all the way down to Tvheadend server and click on that. So at the time of this recording it's Tvheadend 4.2. Let's click on Install. And then I'm going to choose the newest version, which is the one at the top, and click on that. And then from there, click on OK. Now that that's installed, if you move your pointer to the side, you can use the right mouse button to go back. and we need to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi to configure the Tvheadend server. To do this, if we click on the settings cog at the top and then select system information, here you can see the IP address, which in my case is 192.168.0.12, so make a note of yours. Again, you can press the right mouse button to back out of there, and then if you make sure it's not selecting anything, press it again to go back to the main screen. Tvheadend's configuration is done through a web interface, so back on your computer, open a web browser, and we're going to type the IP address of our Raspberry Pi, which in my case is 192.168.0.12, and then Tvheadend listens on port 9981, so I'm going to put :9981 and press enter. The first thing you should see is this welcome message. I'm going to choose my language from the drop down list here as English GB, and then you can set up to 3 languages in the electronic program guide. I'm just going to do language 1 and set it, if I scroll down, to English GB again. Then click on save and next. If it comes back to the same screen, don't worry, just click it again. Here you could lock it down to a particular network or just leave it empty to be accessible from any system. On any computer, particularly a server, it's always a good idea to lock down admin access. So I'm going to set it up with the username admin and give it a super secure password. If you wanted to go even further with your security, you could create a standard user login. I'm not going to bother with this, and then click on save and next. Tvheadend does allow you to set up IPTV, or in other words Internet Protocol TV, but we're not going to do that in this video as we're focusing on over-the-air broadcasts. But what we do want to do is look in this tuner section. You can see it's automatically detected my Raspberry Pi TV hat, which is this Sony tuner here. So all I need to do is select this drop down for network type, and then click on this DVB-T network, or whatever the tuner in your country uses, and then I can click save and next again. On here I need to pick from the list of predefined muxes. A mux or multiplex is simply how TV channels are broadcast or transmitted over the airwaves. So if I click the drop down list, I'm first looking for my country, so right down at the bottom, United Kingdom, and then I'm looking for my region for the TV transmitter, which in my case is Sutton Coldfield, so I can select that one. Then I can click on save and next. Tvheadend is now going to scan the airwaves and find all of the available services. So now would be a great opportunity to grab a coffee. Okay, when it's done you can click save and next. As I'd like to make the setup as painless as possible, I'm going to tick for it to map all of the services automatically, and I'm also going to tick to automatically create both provider tags and network tags. And then I'm going to click on save and next, and that's the setup wizard complete, so we can click on finish. You can tell that it's applied those changes because if, like me, you secured the admin account, we now have to log in with it to access the settings. So let's do that now. Pop in the username you set, then enter the password and click sign in. If you have any problems signing in, click on cancel and then click default login and try again. Once we're logged back in, we get this dialog box confirming that we've now completed the setup wizard, so we can click on finish. Tvheadend server is a powerful piece of software and highly configurable. I'm not going to cover everything in here as there's no need, but let's just take a quick look through the main sections. So you can see it's opened on the electronic program guide tab where we can see details of the channels and programs. The next tab along is for the digital video recorder. If you were to take a look once you've set up some recordings, the details will appear in here. The next tab is configuration. The settings in here are a direct result of the Tvheadend setup wizard that we completed. So in users, there's the admin account I created. DV input shows our TV tuner, or tuners if you've got more than one. You've got networks, where I've got the DVB-T network with its muxes in this tab. Services is an interesting one. If for any reason not all of the channels that you're expecting were showing up, you could come in here and then underneath map services you can map all the services again by clicking map services. The channel EPG tab obviously shows us all of our channels. It also contains the EPG information, in other words where it's pulling the program guide from, in this case over the air. If you are having any difficulties with your program guide, you could rerun the EPG grabbers from here. The recording tab is useful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, in digital video recorder profiles we can see the path where our recordings are stored. And secondly, on the timeshift tab we have the option of enabling this function. This effectively will allow you to pause live TV. The downside is it'll place a larger load on your Raspberry Pi, and also with it constantly writing data it will wear out your storage faster. So for those reasons I won't be enabling it. And then on the About tab we have more information about the software, including a link to the project's website. Notice on the top bar we can see at a quick glance how much storage space we've got left on our Raspberry Pi. This will be useful as you start to fill it up with recordings. That's the Tvheadend server's web interface, and we can log out here and then click log out again to confirm. Okay, we'll close the browser and head back to our Raspberry Pi. Okay, back in Kodi we're now going to set up the Tvheadend client or front end. In this video I'll be doing this on the same Raspberry Pi as the Tvheadend server, but you could set it up on any device running Kodi on your home network. You could even have more than one and watch your TV recordings on multiple devices. Right, so to do this we need to hover over add-ons, then click on Install from repository. From here we need to select all repositories and then scroll down and select PVR client. And if we scroll down again, there's the Tvheadend HTSP client. So click on that and then click on the install button. Just as when we installed the Tvheadend server, the newest version is at the top. So click on that one to install it. If you get this access denied message, don't worry. That's simply because you created a username and password for the Tvheadend server's admin account. So all we need to do is pop in our credentials to allow the client to connect to the server. To do this, click on the Tvheadend HTSP client again, and then click on Configure. Now if you had Kodi running on a different device from the Tvheadend server, say a tablet for example, you'd need to put in the IP address of your Raspberry Pi here. You'd also want to look into setting your Raspberry Pi up with a static IP address. But as we're running both the Tvheadend client and server on the same Raspberry Pi, we can leave it set to 127.0.0.1. But what we do need to do is obviously enter our credentials. So if you click on username, I set the admin username as admin, so enter yours here. Then click on OK. Next click on password and pop that in here and click OK again. Then we just need to apply those changes by clicking OK once more and allow the client to restart. OK, if we right click to back out of there, then right click again. Now if we come up to the TV section, we should be in business. It's pretty self-explanatory, but let's have a look in channels first. So if you know what you want to watch, you can simply come in here and select the channel. And then you've got the controls along the bottom, including the record button. And then you can press stop to exit. If you've got no sound, obviously make sure the volume's turned up on your TV. But if you're using a Raspberry Pi 4, also make sure that you're connected to the HDMI 0 port, the one on the left closest to the power supply. It's best to power off the Pi to do this, which if you go back to the main menu, you've got the power button here, and then you can power off the system. Once you've done that, go back into TV channels and try again. Okay, if we go back again, next along we've got the guide. Naturally you can come in here just to see what you'd like to watch, but it's also very useful for scheduling your recordings. Let's say that later tonight I know that The Hobbit is on and I'd like to record that. I can use the cursor keys on my keyboard to move along the timeline, and then when it's highlighted press enter to select it. Now if it's a one-off event like a film, you can click on the record button, and as you can see, that's now been scheduled to record. But let's say we wanted to record a series, for example Grand Designs. In this case you want to click on Add Timer. Feel free to change any of these options. For example, you might want to stop it from recording duplicate episodes, so you could change it to something like record if episode number differs. And then when you're happy with your selections, click on OK. Notice the difference between the little icons of one that's set to record multiple times and another that's set just to record once. If for some reason you changed your mind and decided you didn't want to record it anymore, you can go back in and simply delete the timer and say yes. Let's select another program. There's a nice option here. If you've found something you like, you can click Find Similar to list other programs that are like it. When you've selected a program from the TV guide, if you just want to watch whatever's broadcasting live on that channel, you can click the switch button. Right, let's back out of the TV guide. Now that we've started using the system, you can see that we get some handy additional information. It tells us at the top what the next recording is, and then down below we've got our recently played channels. Let's record something now so that we can see how it works. So I'll select a program and then press record. You can see we've got the little red dot showing us that it's recording. Okay, that'll do. Let's click on that and stop it. If we go back now and go into the recording section, you can see we've got the program there, so let's click on that and then click on the actual recording. If I don't want the recording anymore, I can either hold down the left mouse button and then let go to get this menu, or right click to get the same one. Then from there I can simply delete it. And that's it, the recording's gone. Back in the main TV menu, next along from recordings, we've got timers. You can see in here what Tvheadend is scheduled to record. If we back out of there and move along, we've then got timer rules. From here you could edit and make changes to any of the timers that you've set up. You could also manually add a timer, but I'd suggest it's much easier to schedule a recording from the TV guide. Okay, let's back out of that. Then lastly in the TV section we have search. So if I scroll to the top and click the search option, this previous entry was automatically generated earlier when I clicked the button to find similar programs, so let's delete that. Then we can enter our search term in here. If it's more than one word, it's a good idea to put it inside of quotes. So let's look for the TV program Bargain Hunt and then click on search. And just like that we have a list of the upcoming episodes and the channels that they're on. And then we can select the program we want and we could set it to record from there. And that's the basics of operating the Tvheadend system through Kodi. Now if you're not familiar with it, as you can probably tell from this left hand menu, Kodi is capable of a lot more than just viewing and recording TV. But let's say that that's all we want to use it for. I'll show you how to remove these superfluous menu entries. First you need to click on the settings cog and then select interface. Next you need to click on configure skin and then choose main menu items. And in this list we're going to make sure that all of these sliders are turned off, with the exception obviously of TV. So go right to the bottom and turn them all off. Now if we go back and go back again and back once more, you can see that we're left with a clean and tidy TV interface. Now with your TV recording set, you're probably going to want to leave your Raspberry Pi turned on all the time, and that's a major advantage of using this little single board computer, as it uses very little power. And if you hide it away behind the back of your TV, it'll just sit there silently doing its job. Now that it's all set up, you're probably not going to want to leave the keyboard and mouse connected. And while I accidentally omitted this from the hardware list at the beginning, I'd recommend that you pick yourself up an inexpensive remote control. I'd go for an RF model as these don't require line of sight like infrared. A quick Amazon search will reveal that they're in plentiful supply. Try and make sure that it works with Linux and the Raspberry Pi and you'll be okay. There are even fancy models with built-in keyboards. You've no doubt discovered already that Kodi has a very TV-friendly interface. It's designed to work well with a remote control. Most of the navigation is pretty intuitive. The one exception is deleting a recording. If you make sure the program is highlighted, you need to long press the OK button on the remote and then let go, and that will reveal the menu with the delete option on it. Just before we finish, I'd like to show you a couple of other ways of watching your recordings on devices on your home network. Since Kodi is cross-platform, if it's available on your device you could install it and do it that way. But let's look at an even easier option. If you recall, when I set it up, I left the Samba file sharing service enabled in LibreELEC. So let's use that to access the TV recordings. If you turned Samba off but you'd like to use it now, go back into the settings in Kodi and then select LibreELEC. Then if you go down to services you can enable Samba in here. Okay, now to do this I'm going to use VLC, an extremely popular free and open source media player. So let's take a look at how this works on a Windows computer first. Let's open a web browser and we're going to go to www.videolan.org and then click on the big download VLC button. Now obviously if you've already got VLC Media Player you can skip ahead to after we've installed it. Right, I'm going to save that to my downloads directory, and once it's downloaded I can close the web browser. Okay, let's open Windows File Explorer, browse to the downloads directory and double click the download to begin the installation. Click on Yes to proceed, then click on OK. And now we need to run through the install wizard, so click Next, then click Next again to agree to the license. It's up to you if you want to change any of these installation options. I'm just going to leave them alone and then click on Next once more, and then we can click on Install. Once it's installed you can see we've got a handy desktop shortcut, but if we leave this checkbox ticked it'll run anyway when we click Finish. You can decide if you want VLC to access the internet for additional information about your media and to check for updates. I'm going to leave both of those ticked and click Continue, and then I'm going to maximize the window. From here we need to click on the Toggle Playlist button, and then in the left hand menu underneath Local Network select MDNS Network Discovery. Give it a moment to discover any available devices on your home network. When I set up LibreELEC earlier I left it on the default host name. Hopefully you're seeing whatever you called yours. If that's not the case and you haven't been prompted to do so already, you may need to allow it access through the firewall. So to do that, come down to the search box and search for firewall and then click on Windows Defender Firewall. From there click on Allow an app or feature through Windows Defender Firewall. Then select Change Settings, followed by Allow another app. Next we need to browse for the VLC program, so click on Local Disk C, double click on Program Files, scroll down and double click on Video LAN, double click on VLC and then select VLC, the little traffic cone, and click Open. Then all that's left to do is click on Add, make sure that the new entry for VLC Media Player is ticked and that its private box is also ticked, and then click OK. Now if we return to VLC, hopefully it's showing up. If there's more than one entry for the device, as there is here, we need to find out which one is our Samba file sharing service, and we can do that by right clicking on the entry and choosing Information. At the bottom of the dialog box that's just open we've got Location, and in the address here there's two details that tell us this is the entry we're looking for. At the start we can see it's using the SMB or Server Message Block protocol, and at the end we can see it's using port number 445. Both of these identify that the connection is using Samba. So let's close the dialog box and double click on the entry to open it. Then we can double click on recordings, double click on the recorded program we want to watch, and then double click on the actual recording you want to play, which is pretty easy for me because I've only got one.
Not as good
Stop
for us.
that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you know...
And that's how you watch your Raspberry Pi's Tvheadend recordings using VLC Media Player in Windows. Now let's look at playing our recordings from an Android device. This time we'll be using VLC in its Android adaptation. So let's open Google's Play Store and search for VLC. Then select it from the list and click on Install. Once that's complete, we can close the Play Store and you should have a shortcut on your home screen. If it's not there, check in your app drawer. So let's launch VLC Media Player, then work our way through the welcome wizard. We need to give it access to the storage. Then it's a good idea to let it automatically scan for content and then select Done. If this menu doesn't show, you can select the hamburger menu up here to reveal it. To play our TV recordings, we're going to choose local network, and then assuming you didn't change the name of it during the setup, select LibreELEC, and then you can go to the recordings folder. And sure enough, there's the Salvage Hunters TV program, and I can choose the recording to play it. As it's the first time running, we get these notifications on the screen, so we can dismiss those.
Not as good for us.
Okay.
And then we can exit out of there. If you're using an iPhone or iPad, known as VLC for mobile, VLC Media Player is also available for iOS from Apple's App Store. One last word about the TV tuner. If you're running the Tvheadend server on a Raspberry Pi but not using the Pi TV hat and have instead opted to use a USB tuner, as with a remote control, just double check, preferably before purchase, that it's compatible with the Raspberry Pi and Linux. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you can see the benefits as well as the cost savings of setting up a personal video recorder on your Raspberry Pi. Whether it's TV shows, movies or documentaries that you're into, a Pi PVR will allow you to take control of your TV viewing and watch the content at a time that suits you and on a device of your choosing. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified when I post the next one, just click the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.